Tag. Cool. How is everybody doing today? Good. What is it? Today is what? Thursday, right? Friday, Wednesday? Wednesday. I like that. In my line of work, I have a saying, every day's Saturday, right? And every day's Saturday for me, I feel like that because normally on Saturday, I don't know if it's like how my Saturdays used to be, like you wake up around, like 10 o'clock in the morning and it's kind of a day to like get some things done like laundry and I don't know, chores like around the house and everything, and then you go out and do something fun on Saturday night and like you get to kind of sleep in like the next day, right? So that's literally my line of work allows me to have like that lifestyle every single day, right? So I kind of lose sight on like what day it actually is. I have this incredible little device right here called an iPhone. Anybody know what this is, right? And if you could believe that, you put things in it where I need to go and like who I need to talk to like on a daily basis to completely take the thinking like out almost 100%. So that's the idea of what I like. And when I'm going to talk about this, I think I graduated from Cal State San Marcos about 2 years ago, but I wasn't a business major, right? I actually graduated in the communications department, and strangely enough, Jim and I were talking, and I made a joke about this because I do more work with students in the College of Business who are alumni or who either went through this program and didn't even go through the business program. Now, had there been an entrepreneur's track and I had met folks like Jim, and you don't know how lucky you are to have him as a professor, I probably would have ended up here. But there was a reason why, I didn't come back to business school. Actually, the truth be told, when I was 20 years old, after I had successfully started my first business, getting into the second career that I, had started, which was brokerage, I dropped out of college because I learned that in the first 2 years of going to college, I was living up in Los Angeles, and I'd started a clothing company when I was 18 years old, and I had some success with it. And I was sitting in my college classes, taking all my prereqs for business, but at the same time being out in the real world, actually, conducting myself in business on like a regular basis. And so I'd sit in my Accounting 101 class. You remember that class, right? Or your business administration like 101 class, and I'd sit there and I'd be like out in the world actually like trying to run my clothing company and dealing with like invoices and somebody to keep books and sales reps and paying people and state board equalization and like all the licensing that you need in order to like do and conduct business. And in my business administration like 101 class, they weren't talking about any of this. I go sit in my accounting class and, they're talking about, they have like a ledger sheet up on like the board. I think they had, this is even, not to date myself, but like 10 years ago, I think that they still had like the overhead projectors, right? Like at the college I was going to. And they'd have like the ledger sheet with like the debits and the credits. And like, I'm sitting there with like, just like so frustrated in this class. And like, I asked, I raised my hand and the professor's like, takes a deep breath because he knows that my question probably isn't going to be anything on the topic. And he says like, yes, Steve, what's the question? I said, I don't understand something. And he's like, what don't you understand? I said, why does it make sense for us to learn how to account for money that we don't know how to make yet? Does that ever like dawn on you before teaching this class? I was like, because if what I'm learning, if let me get this straight, if what you're trying to teach me here is that I'm going to have to spend the rest of my life accounting for other people's money, right? That's not a class I want to take, right? Like I don't want to sign up for that. Where can I go to learn how to like actually make money and create wealth? Because I'll promise you this. If I signed up for business school and there was a class in there called How to Get Rich, like 101, right? Or how to like successfully retire without ever having to work like a job and getting some kind of like, having like a 5 to 10 year exit strategy that wasn't going to take me 40 years. Like if there was classes like that in my college catalog, I would have signed up, paid for them in advance, and would have been 5 minutes early to every single class, But that day never came. I hung out there in school and I continued to go, and the day never came where like what I was actually experiencing in the real world running my business, they actually started to teach me in college, right? So I decided to leave. Now, this is different for all you people because if you're hanging out with Jim, and you're taking classes and you're in the entrepreneur's track, what he's actually giving you something is something that's real special that I don't think a lot of the other, universities in academia, at least not in this country, have quite caught up with yet. Some of them are on the cutting edge of this. You probably know some of these schools that are really preparing you for the next phase, or whatever that's going to be. But specifically here and working with him, and why I love hanging out with Jim and talking to like, people that are going through the entrepreneurship program is because that's what you're learning here. Real world, scenarios of what you're going to be toiling with the day that you graduate here that are going to give you some kind of a competitive advantage for whatever industry that you want to end up in. And so I think that that's very important, and like that to me is money well spent. You know, a good portion of the money that you spend on your education, I think a lot of the times students forget that you're supposed to be getting something in return. It's not like you pay all this money to the institution and then like you have to jump through all these hoops, it seems like, right? I don't even know if you can graduate in under 5 years anymore because of how hard the classes are to get and everything, right? That was my experience when I was finishing here. But the point is that you're supposed to get something in return, and what you're supposed to get in return is that education. You know, you're supposed to get, you know, those skills that are going to help you in the real world that allow you to support yourself. Because if you talk to me and it had to be anything else besides maybe this program and the few like schools and the professors that I've experienced in the last couple of years who are actually teaching these types of concepts, ultimately, at least what it was doing 5 years ago when I got back into school, what they're doing is they're saying, give me about $80,000 to $120,000 in 4 years of your time, and there's going to be a 15% chance that you might find a job that's going to pay you $35,000 a year coming out of school. You know, I don't know if there's any math majors out there or anything. I'm horrible at math, which is funny because I worked in finance for a number of years. But if you do the math on it, making $35,000 a year with a 2 to 5% raise and your college loan is $80,000, how long is it going to take you to get out of debt, right? Roughly somewhere between like 8 to 12 years. So if you actually get done with like college, by the time you're 24, 25, that you're looking at just being out of debt to a place where like maybe you could buy a house or start saving somewhere in like your mid-30s, right? Sound like fun? Ready to show of hands? Nobody. Okay, so to get into what I'm talking about, so I was running that clothing company, and this is what was going through my mind. I read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Anybody ever hear that book? Good, cool. Got a couple hands on that. And I realized after reading that book that the cavalry wasn't coming, you know, that there wasn't going to be some golden way or like that there wasn't one method to getting to what I wanted to be in life, which was successful. And my definition of success had changed. If you talk to me, you know, 5-6 years ago, my definition of success was like, I want to be a millionaire. You know, I want to have $20 million like in the bank so I can go do whatever I want. But that's changed now, right? I've learned, especially over the past couple years and the ups and downs that I've experienced in business, that, you know, all that success really is to me defined as like being able to do whatever I want, as long as I want to, wherever I want to, with whomever I want to do it with. And that the amount of money that I need to do that isn't necessarily millions of dollars, right? I mean, it could literally be maybe $150,000, $200,000 a year, something that's very obtainable to me. I used to think that, you know, I'm just going to work extremely hard until like I kill myself doing it for, you know, as long as I need to until I make like enough money to where I can just check out. And I think that's a trap that a lot of us get stuck in, and a lot of my parents and their generation got stuck in, you know, that they couldn't get out of. And so it's changed, right? What I've learned through business and everything is that, you know, just being out in the real world is that I don't necessarily need to be a millionaire to be happy. And if I can create and design a life that, you know, has that kind of goal in mind where I can literally, you know, meet my definition of success, then I feel pretty good. You know what I mean? Like I've got a good life. Then every day to me is Saturday. Does that make sense? Right? So that's what I've created. When I got out of that, I was saying this to the group before, I think that the mark of a good entrepreneur is knowing when to get out of something, you know? And I think that that's something that you can only learn by failing at a couple things, right? And so I was also talking with the group before where every single successful person that I met, and I know that Jim would agree with me on that, has gone out and they failed at a lot of different things, right? You cannot be scared to take risks. You have to take risks, right? Bigger risks, no reward. And, you know, it looks something like this, because I drew this up the other day. Can we get a marker for this? Is there even a marker for this board? Possibly? You got one? Get out of town. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is Zach Morrison here in the back. He's one of the people that I work with too. Jason have also joined me today. And just as a testament, they come prepared. You know what I mean? Good job. So this is it, right? This is the model that I came to understand. When somebody's like getting involved in like the normal, right? What did all of our parents tell us? You grow up and like you go to, and you get a, right? Or, well, no, you just need a degree first, right? Go to college, right? Then you get a what? You get a degree. Then you get a what? Job at a company. What kind of company? Like right? Corporation, well-known, substantial corporation that everyone knows about that has what? Benefits, right? And pays you like hopefully enough money to like where you can offset some of that debt and possibly raise a family out. So that all sounds, and it sounds like a good deal because there's security in it. You're just like, all right, I know I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get out, I'm going to make $50,000 a year at this, right? They're going to like take care of my retirements. I'm just going to give them my money and they're going to invest it for me, right? You ever hear of a company called Enron? I should ask those people how they thought, like, you know, how the company handled their investments and their pensions, because some people like worked for that company 50 years and lost everything. Anyway, this is the model that they told us, right? So it looks something like this. Let's call this money, and let's call this time, right? So that model that they sold us, right, looks something like this. You spend all this money, right, and then this happens. Right? You kind of plateau out, and then you retire, right? You have a lot of time now, not so much money, right? What I wanted to do is like, well, couldn't I do something like this, right? Where the amount of money that I made was exponential while the amount of time that I actually had to spend getting it went down, right? This was the business model that I was looking for. What that means is that you would need to find something that's automated, right? 90 to 100% automated, meaning that you can eliminate yourself from the equation, still making the same amount of money, right, without having to spend the time to do that. Now, there's a couple businesses that are like that out there. Can anybody name one? Or businesses that are like that? They require very little bit of your time, very little bit of overhead to actually run it.
Books.
Writing, okay, so that would be a good example, right? You could write a book one time and then you'll continue to get paid what? Royalties on it. Or you could make some kind of what? Software program or an invention, right? You can make an invention and you make that one time, then it continues to pay you. These are the types of businesses that really started to interest me, right? This is how I found myself into multi-level marketing. But before I get ahead of myself and talk about this, I got into the brokerage industry when it was like great. And I was like, all right, so here's my thinking that when I was running my clothing business, right? Everything went overseas in like 2004. And I'm like 2003, 2004. I'm 20 years old, right? I couldn't believe that it had been as successful as it had been because I had no idea what I was doing. And they weren't teaching me anything in business school that was actually helping me out with it. So I had a really good mentor who like helped me out. In fact, in every single like successful thing that I've ever attempted, there's always been like a really good mentor who's been successful at it and taught me that. That's kind of what you're getting again by taking this track here. You know, is that you're getting people that have actually been out there in the real world who are sharing their advice. They're not talking from what they've read out of textbooks. They're talking about what they've experienced in life, you know, and I think that that's the most valuable information that you can get. So, you know, I took a look at this. I'm 20 years old. Everything's going overseas, and I was just like, you know what? I spent 220 days like on the road that year. I had like 14 reps. It was killing me doing the books and everything. Like that makes me laugh too because you remember that accounting class I was telling you about, right? I hired somebody to come in and do the books, I think for like minimum wage to like do my QuickBooks at home. So, you know, I guess Henry Ford said it best. If you can't do it right, find somebody to do it for you that can do like 10 times better at it and just pay them really well, you know? So that'll help you out in starting any kind of business because trust me, there's a lot of things that I'm really not good at, and I struggled with this in my young 20s. Instead of trying to do everything myself, I have to like let it go and realize that I need to form interdependent relationships with people who are better than me at things and then let them sort of make decisions, you know? So getting back to this too, I got out of the clothing business because it stopped being, first of all, it stopped being fun. The only reason I started that business was so that I didn't have to work like a real job. That's all I wanted to do. I was working at Guitar Center before that. Any musicians in here, right? So at 18 years old, Guitar Center seemed like a great job. Like I was like, I can go in, mess around, play with like guitars all day long and sell some stuff. That was the first commission sales job that I ever had. It was actually kind of fun. And I couldn't understand, like, it never seemed that hard to me, right? Like you're telling people what they already want, you know? And they come in there to buy something. So I'm working there, but then I read that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Then I decide to start my clothing company. I have no idea what I'm doing. I walk into a bank and I'm like, I need a loan to start a business. And the guy laughed at me. He literally laughed at my dreams. Can you believe that? Some 18-year-old kid asked him. I was only asking him for $25,000. It seemed like a reasonable amount of money to ask for. But I went out and raised the money privately. And I started it. And, you know, once I got that mentor, it got a whole lot easier because I got to avoid a lot of the things that cost me time and money, are two most valuable assets, time and money. And I was able to have some success, and sell the clothes like around the country and out in the UK. But then 2 years later, it stopped being fun. That thing that I had started to like not have to work a real job, do my own business, build my own brand and everything, became like a prison. Because I was working 70 hours a week at it while trying to like go to school full time, and then I traveled about 220 days out of the year for those 2 years that I was in it. Does that sound like fun, right? Like I couldn't play with my friends anymore. There was no, I'm going surfing today to like hang out and everything. It was definitely not this, right? It was quite the opposite. It was like the more that I took on, the more time that it stole from me. The more money that I made, the more time that I had to sacrifice. I had to trade more of my hours in order to get more of that money, and it wasn't worth it. So I got out of that at 20, and somebody introduced me to brokerage, right? Basically doing mortgages. And I got in, and I learned that business very quickly, and I made the decision to drop out of college. I was sitting in an algebra class one day, and I remember, I'm really bad at math. I'm just horrible at math. And the teacher had the quadratic formula up on the board, right? I think the quadratic formula up on the board. And I'm trying to negotiate, like, with my brain, why I should commit this to brain space. Because I don't know about you, but like, they asked that question, they're like, one train's headed this fast, heading towards like another train going like this fast. And I'm just like, the way my brain works is like, that's a trick question. Those trains are going to crash. We should get off. Now. Like right now, don't sit there and figure that out. We can deal with this when we safely exit this train because it's heading for a deathly destruction, So I'm trying to negotiate with my mind like why I should commit some of this to brain space, and I cannot figure it out. And I just make a decision like in that moment that I'm done with college. I'm just going to go pursue this and whatever. And my parents weren't happy about this, right? Because remember, I'm still 20 years old, and I'd done pretty well like on my own at that point, but my parents both went to school. They're very traditional in that way. And I said, Mom and Dad, I'm dropping out of college. I'm going to go start, a brokerage firm. And they're just like, what are you doing, Steve? Like, why don't you just stay there and figure it out? Like, it's not that bad and hang out. But I did it, and I had a lot of success with that. And then the most miraculous thing happened a year later. My dad's a doctor. My mom's a registered dietitian. By the time I was 21 and I moved down here to open up my own brokerage firm, I made more money than my father that next year. And I never heard about dropping out of college again, right? But then what changed was that a year later, I decided to go back to school, right? And I decided to go back to school. It wasn't because it was like with a different mentality. I understand that there is something incredibly valuable about being in college, right? And the most valuable things are like the unquantified things, the relationships that you make with people, the use of your time of like what you're actually doing here. It's not necessarily going to teach you how to create wealth, but what it will teach you is how to formulate those types of interdependent relationships with the right key people that will help you do that, And so when I came back here, it was really, that's how I ended up as a communications major, because I was like, well, what are they going to teach me at business school? You know what I mean? I was like, what are they going to teach me in business school that like I didn't already know? Had there been an entrepreneur's track and I met Jim, you should see if you can find kids like me down at the admissions department, right, who are like jaded about like college, like I'm not going to business school or whatever. But I figured I came back here with like sort of an open mind and a new mentality to just become a smarter individual. You know what I mean? Become more well-rounded, cultured individual. Figured like I'd meet a couple like good people, and then I ended up, hanging out with like a lot of the people out here because they think like me. You know what I mean? Or maybe I think like them. I don't really know, but we're like-minded in that way. And I came back here, and then life was really good. I was working on this, right? I was making good money. I had that time, but then something happened in September 2008. I had taken a long extended vacation to like Western Europe, and I came back home in like August. And then anybody remember what happened in September 2008? No one? It wasn't that? Okay, the market crash. It's kind of a big deal if you're a business major, you're going to do anything in finance. Yeah, the Dow dropped like 477 points in a day. And I came to walk into my brokerage firm, and there was a padlock on the door with the notice from like the Department of Real Estate saying like, you guys are done, And overnight, that industry completely disappeared, right? And that was a lesson to me to never get too specialized in any one industry, because you never know, just like Jim was talking about. With Kodak, technologies change, industries change, businesses change, And if you go into school and you're specialized in like one very niche market, and then your industry ceases to exist, or they can find somebody halfway around the world to do it for like 1/4 the cost of you, then like they're going to go there. You know what I mean? So the best way to protect yourself or to insulate yourself is by knowing a little bit about a lot of different things. You know what I mean? Which any good entrepreneur that I've ever met, they all share that thing in common. You know what I mean? They're just very sort of, they have an array of knowledge about a bunch of like different things. And so I became to sort of educate myself when it came to these things. And I found myself looking for another opportunity, more importantly, another career. And this is when I found what I do now, which is multi-level marketing. Now, just to talk a little bit about this, there's thousands of multi-level marketing companies out there. What are some of the ones that you guys have all heard about? Amway, right? Arbonne, Mary Kay. What is it? Secret, right? That's a newer one, right? Skincare one that came out, what, a year and a half ago, right? Anybody else? Zango, Vima, right? These are all multi-level marketing companies. And, you know, the industry is a very interesting industry because what I was thinking, especially coming from like where I was coming from, was I was just like, you can't make any money at that, right? That's a scheme, right? That's like a pyramid deal. This is my general understanding of like multi-level marketing. I had never really met anybody who had made any kind of like real serious money doing some kind of a multi-level marketing business. And so here I am, 23 years old. How much time do I have here? Got time, right? Okay. I'm about 23 years old. I had gone from literally, oh man, it was like my life was like good. I was like going to school for fun, paying for it out of pocket. I'm making like, you know, in between $18,000 to $25,000 like a month doing like this. I had it figured out. You know, I was just like taking vacations to Europe. I was like, my life was good, to like the industry completely disappearing overnight, and I'm like $140,000 in debt. And every single house that I bought was worth like $100,000 less than I bought it for. And I'm like 23, and I have no idea what my next move is going to be. You know, my last year, truth be told, my last year of being in my college, I was living off, I hadn't taken a school loan until like my last year, but I was literally, for like that year, pretty much living off of like my school loan to just get by. You know what I mean? Hemorrhaging money, like totally in debt, don't know like what the next thing is going to be. And I'm not suggesting this, but this is a risk that I took, right? Going the way that I was going, had the market been like going the same way that it was, I'd have been a millionaire by 25 years old, you know? But these are the things that happen, right? I couldn't have ever imagined that it would get that bad. And I think that a lot of people never thought that it was going to get that bad, but it did. So I'm looking for an opportunity. I'm like $140,000 in debt, and some guy starts talking to me about multi-level marketing, and I go home and I'm just like, oh my God, like it's got, you know, this is what it's come to. I was like, this is what it's come to. He, for the first time, I'd written because I'd never written a resume before, and I put some kind of like a resume together, which probably wasn't good. Probably should have went to the Career Center or something and like gotten a little help trying to write it. But it's like, how do I write it? When I went out actually like looking for some kind of a job or seeking some kind of employment in the interim, what I found out was that corporate America wants nothing to do with a 23-year-old kid that has successfully started companies, that hasn't finished school, that's written like books before, that has like a following and is like a self-starting entrepreneur type. They want nothing to do with me. And the reason why they want nothing to do with me is because I would come into any kind of like office setting and I would spot these inefficiencies very quickly, you know, and I would have a very hard time taking, you know, orders from 12 different bosses that are asking me to do different things that like aren't that important, and I don't see the value in like my time being spent doing these things, right? So more or less to shorten that story, I was like unemployable. You know what I mean? Almost unemployable from any like corporate sense of the word. And I'd been broken before because I knew that if I just go out there and I look hard enough and I make relationships with people and like I depend on like what I know and to just sort of work towards, you know, doing something for myself and building something for myself, that eventually I would find it. So this guy sits down and he starts talking to me about network marketing, and I'll share with you this story because it's kind of funny. Anybody ever heard of a company called Monavie? Right? A couple people, right? So this is the first company that I was ever introduced in. I've been in two, right? That was the first one. The second one is what I do now. It's called Rev Energy. The first one, so this guy finds like my resume. I think I put it on theladders.com. Do you remember? It's like 100K plus ExecuSearch website. Is it even still around anymore? I don't even know, right? But the idea was that this was like a website for executives that were looking for $100,000 more type like jobs, and this dude who's in multi-level marketing calls me on this resume, right? So I guess anybody can get into the website. There's no filter, I guess, to filter him out. But he calls me up and he's like, hey, I've got this really interesting opportunity. I've never heard of this industry before, ever. You know what I mean? No one had ever showed it to me. And he's like, can you meet me at Islands? We all know what Islands is, right? It's like Hawaiian Denny's. And and so I'm just like, yeah. So I put on like my best like suit and tie, and I think it's kind of weird that this dude wants to meet me like in Islands at 2:00 in the afternoon. Like most of the time you meet, like I'd never worked a corporate job, but like I would imagine that it'd be at some office building with like a secretary in front or something like that. So I'd met some pretty eccentric, like, successful people, and I was just like, maybe he really likes Hawaiian burgers or whatever, I'll just go meet him. So I go down and I meet him, and I'm in like a suit and tie, and this dude shows up, and he's like wearing a Hawaiian shirt and like shorts, and we go sit down, and I'm just like, man, what's going on here? And then he pulls out this bottle of Monavie. Have you ever seen the product? It's like that company, they make this like an acai like drink, but it comes in what looks like a wine bottle, right? So he pulls this bottle out like from under the table at Islands at 2:00 in the afternoon. I think he like snuck in a bottle of wine, and he's gonna try to drink it with me on the job interview. And I'm just like, dude, this is weird. Like what is happening right now? So I was like, and then he goes on, he's like, no, that's not wine. He starts telling me all about this product and how great it is and all this. And after 20 minutes, I stop him, and I was just like, dude, what's the job? You know what I mean? Like what are we really talking about here? He's like, well, this is it. I was like, what do you mean this is it? He's like, this is it, like Monavie, this juice. I was like, I don't understand. What do you want me to sell this? I don't get it. And he's like, well, no, it's like network marketing. I'd never heard that term, so I'm just like, what is that, like computers and stuff, right? Like I didn't understand what he was talking about. And then he starts explaining to me like, oh no, it's like, this is a distribution like method that, he started getting the analytics of it. And I very quickly stopped him and said like, hold on, wait a second. You mean to tell me that you got me all the way out here on a Tuesday afternoon in my suit and tie like at Islands to talk to me about some multi-level marketing pyramid scheme? I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I was very upset with him, and I told him about it, right? I won't share the rest of that story with you, but I told him about how I felt about his industry, and then I grabbed that bottle, I said, I'm taking this with me, and I left, right? And on the way home, I'm driving, and I'm thinking to myself, like, the audacity this man had, right? Didn't he read my resume? Didn't he see the things that like I'd accomplished? I can't believe he thinks that I would pay money to get involved in his business, right? Like, why should I have to pay money to get involved in like something like that? And it just really showed how little I actually knew about the industry, because just like any other corporation or any other job that you can get, the network marketing industry or even the direct sales industry does how much, Zach, a year?
117 billion in 2011.
Say how much?
117 billion in sales in 2011.
So $117 billion in sales in 2011, right? And it's never seen a down year, right? In the history of our economy, right? Never seen a down year in the history of our economy. And this particular company that this guy was talking about, I go home and I'm pissed. I'm really pissed off about this, right? Like, I can't believe how the audacious nature of like him thinking that I would pay to get involved in this business. So I go home, but the entrepreneurial side of me kicks in, because if I learn anything in business, right, it doesn't hurt to look. It doesn't hurt to educate myself about it, to find out like about the industry. So I go and I start reading up on it, and it turns out that this particular company had gone from zero, right, from inception, from like the start, to $1 billion pure profit in 3 years' time, the fastest company in U.S. history to ever do that, right? And I was like beside myself. So I think, still being as skeptical as I was like, well, surely something illegal is going on here, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this, right? So I start making some inquiries, right, to see like if all these guys have actually paid their taxes and stuff like that. I was like the most super skeptical dude when it came to this industry, and when I found out that they weren't, that it's totally legitimate. That there's probably a multi-level marketing company for just about every single product or service that you could possibly think of. 1,000 new ones start. They have the same failure rate as any small business would, and it's just another industry. You know what I mean? It's like the idea that just because Enron was, what, Jim, an S corporation technically, right? So same with Starbucks, right? So just because Enron went down and hurt a lot of people doesn't necessarily mean that Starbucks is bad. You know what I mean? They're almost the same business model. One's a consumer product, the other did a bunch of other things, but they're still a corporation, you know? And so I was open to it, and I called the guy back and I said, listen, after I found out there was nothing wrong or nothing illegal actually going on, and this is one product. They had one product. That was it at the time. One simple product that was like a very, what I consider to be kind of overpriced, like health and wellness product, but like they were able to accomplish those numbers. So I called the guy back and I said, listen, I'm still very skeptical about this, but I can't really punch any holes through this. This looks like a real legitimate business model, and can you introduce me to somebody that's had a whole lot of success? And so then he introduced me to another fellow that became like a mentor to me and really taught me the business. And, the rest of it was history. What I fell in love with the idea of like that business and getting into Rev was really cool because it was literally like a startup company 3 years ago, right? There was like maybe 900 customers of the like, right? And we had like one simple product. Two, it comes in like I'm sure one of these guys probably, if you ask them really nicely, like after, they could probably show you a couple of them. But they have one. Do you actually have one on you? He's got two. So they come in these like single serving packs, right? It just made sense, right? They're healthy energy drink, almost like replacement, right? You mix it in an 8-ounce bottle of water. It's really good for you. Can anybody guess what the price on this is? $100 for one of these? Sure. Yeah. Right. $150 for a case of 4. This is one of my biggest like price impediments too. But how much do you think like one of these would be? 50 cents, $3, right? How much is an energy drink? $2.50, right? So these about like range from about 66 cents to about $1.10. So that was the idea. We found a model where just like any business, right? Take the multi-level marketing aspect like aside completely away from this, and like we had a pretty incredible product. It was like something that was comparable with everything that you could buy out there retail for like 1/3 the price of like a Red Bull or a Rockstar. This made sense to me, The business, like the business, simple business side of that totally made sense to me. So I got involved with a couple people. I did my research and I found out who I was getting in business with, and like we took on a couple partners and we started. And that was about 3 years ago. There was about 900 people in the company at the time. We've now built that to about 25,000 distributors in 5 different countries over the past 3 years, right? And so I think about 3,500 or so like within my organization. That's exactly what Jason and Zach here do with me like on a regular basis. And the idea was this is why I fell in love with that industry, because I got to have the same tax benefits that I did if I started my own business, right? If I started a pizza shop, right, I'd still have the same tax benefits that I would than if I was, a network marketer, right? But what it allowed me to do was I could continue to, put in the same amount of time. How many hours a week do you think that you'd need to work to make like a 6-figure income doing like what I do? Just guess. 10? Really? You might make it in the industry with that attitude. Well, how much? I guess I'm asking the wrong question. How many hours do you think you'd have to work in like a corporation to make some kind of a 6-figure income? 60 to 70 plus. That's like the standard, right? How many years do you think like you'll work in like your lifetime? You know anybody who retired? What's the retirement? 65 now? And then you get your Social Security. But is it really still 65? Well, hold on. Let me ask this question. Who in here actually believes you're going to see your Social Security? Just out of curiosity. Nobody believes that? Okay. Well, at least yeah, I'm not planning on seeing mine either, right? And you know how just as a sidebar here, you know how they calculate that, right? The median average lifespan, people are supposed to like die like right around like 65. So the way that the government figured that out is that you die right about the time that you would start collecting your Social Security, right? That's just sounds mean. It's just like messed up, right? They're trying to raise the age right now to 70 years old anyway. But who in here when's the last time you've been to Walmart, right? Who's greeting at the door? Really think about that. Really think about that. Why is it so hard for you now as like coming back, like brand new people coming into the marketplace, right? That are coming into the job market looking for jobs, right? It's not just hard for you because the market's flooded and the economy's bad, but who else has re-entered the workforce? Right. So like learning from all this, right? And watching this all happen, I needed something that was going to be secure, that was going to be long-term, that was going to allow me to yeah, I'd like to work 10 hours a week, but literally, I mean, that's what I do these days, right? About 10 to 15, maybe on a week where we do like a lot of traveling, a lot of meetings, like maybe 20 hours a week. You know what I mean? Doing what I'm doing, right? 20 hours a week doing what I'm doing. But here's the thing, right? In the beginning, time, right? You're not going to make a whole lot of money the first year and a half, 2 years. This is the big filtering process of our industry, right? We are so ingrained and like we're so used to like seeing like, look, I give you an hour of my time, like you pay me $15, right? Or like I'm not going to come there, right? And we're so sold on this like idea that like we conform to this whole trading dollars for hours thing that like we can't look like long term like that. And so to me, coming from like where I come from, having started these businesses, I was just like, wait a second. And this is for any network marketing company, just speaking generally here too. It costs you somewhere in between like a couple $100 and like, I don't know, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, depending on like the company to get involved in it, right? Then there'll be like some monthly. Most companies call it an auto ship where you have to buy some of their products or something like that on like a monthly basis, right? So here's what most people think. They're like, why should I have to pay money to get involved, right? And why should I have to pay money on like a monthly business? And so what I do is compare it to some kind of a small business, right? So who in here's actually started a business or has a business or something like that, right? All right, let's take Matt.
I started my entertainment and production company that involves like productions.
Cool. Cost to start it.
Well, luckily a lot of our friends have the equipment up front, so it's kind of just paid by.
Let's say you had to buy all the equipment though.
10 to 20 grand.
Right? And do you need some kind of an office place or a place to store it?
Yeah, somewhere to store it. It's like a household.
You know, a sort of household, so you're going to have to sign a lease on something, right? About what's the shortest lease you think you could get on some kind of like office space or like a house?
3 years.
So maybe, so let's call it a year. You know what I mean? Let's just call it a year, right? Then you need, right, business license, state board of equalization. If you have any products, you're going to need to sell something. You're going to need a seller's permit and everything like that. So how much does it cost to start a business? Any ideas? 50 to 100,000, maybe like $200,000, right, to start. That's on a very low end, you know, right? And I always like using Pizza Shop, right, because like how many pizzas do you think you could actually sell without duplicating that before like you hit the limit of the total amount of money that you needed to make, right? You either need to franchise, open more pizza shops, which means more pizza ovens, more employees, right, more security systems so that the high school kids that you hire aren't stealing pizza and giving it away from their friends and everything like that. It just starts getting complicated and it was like a big headache. And so come back to what I started talking about as like I wrap this up here. It is that idea of the automation. You know what I mean? Being able to replace myself, you know, to completely replace myself, to take myself out of the equation, because what I do want is I want the success of the money, and I want the success of the business and the money that it creates, but I don't want to have to spend 100 hours there a week, you know? And then I want to be able to duplicate that. The cool thing about like my industry is that, all right, so if it costs you $50,000 or $100,000 to start a business, right, and this is common accepted, how much time will it take you before you break even and like make it profitable if it doesn't go under? 3 to 5 years, right? About 3 to 5 years, right? So now we're talking, it's like in our industry, when I looked at this model, I was like, so let me get this straight. It's going to cost me about, let's say on the highest end, maybe like $1,500 or $2,000 to get involved in like this business. And then I have to spend $150 a month on product, which is like, you know, you'd spend 3 times that just on your utilities of like your office space or wherever it is that you're living, right? And so that's my marketing material, because I actually need this I actually like need these tangible products to like hand people to explain to them like what it is that we do and what we market. And so, you know, that's a calculated cost, which is also a tax deduction, but I can't legally say that because I'm not a CPA, just because I know we're being videotaped. So just make sure that I got that out of the way. You know, but the idea is like this, right? It would basically cost me let's say over a year's time, I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000 to like start my business. I'm going to get a chance to work with like, you know, people who have like been in the industry for a very long time who will train me for free because they have a vested monetary interest that I do well, meaning that if I can't help Zach and Jason here make any money, then I can't make any money, right? Because the company's not salarying me. I'm paid completely like on my performance, and my performance is like how well I'm able to like teach other people how to do what I do and then build like an organization, a distribution method, right? And so the investment, right, the return on our investment, when you do it, if you do it in a traditional business, you're looking 3 to 5 years, right, before like you hit the black and then you start making money. Our return on our investment, or like a break-even point, is within months, because it's not $50,000, it's a couple $1,000s, right? So if our break-even point is like, it takes me 3 to 6 months to get there, and all I'm making is $40 a week, right? Let's say I'm making $40 a week after the end of 6 months. Aren't I in a 10 times better place than I would be if I started my own business? Because they're like, oh, you're only making $40 a week at that? Like, that's crazy. And I'm just like, no, you're looking at it wrong, because if I created an income-producing asset that is going to continue to expand, that I've now recovered all the costs that I've spent to start up my business. I have all the same tax benefits that anybody would if they actually own any other kind of business. And I'm now in the black, and it's taken me 6 months, and I'm making $40 like a week in like the black. Isn't that actually pretty incredible? You know, now people don't get it because then when you start put some time into it and you continue to build it and you continue to build it more and more and it goes up, the amount of time that I'm actually spending, just like in the beginning, is still 15, 20 hours a week. The only thing that's changing is that $40 a week has now turned into like $800 a week, $900. You know, up into a point where it begins to produce like more money than like doing it. I'll share Jim about this. I have a cousin, right? And I'll end with this story with this, right? And then take some questions. Should be good. And this is kind of a testament and just kind of a culmination of like everything that I've learned over the past 10 years, where I've gotten a great insight on just general business, because I've gone from starting my own business to like becoming a part of like a bigger firm and more of a corporate setting to going into like multi-level marketing, which is the last place that I ever thought that I would end up. Right? And then able to sort of finish school in there too, so I've gotten to experience a lot of different things. Well, about 3 years ago, I pick up this book called Beach Money, and it's like a general book on multi-level marketing, right? Peggy's got one in the back there too. And I'm at my 89-year-old grandma's house, and I'd been doing multi-level marketing for a year. Everyone thought I was crazy. When I left like the brokerage like industry to get involved in multi-level marketing, everyone thought I lost my head, you know what I mean? Like they thought I went crazy, including my parents. Like they didn't really understand where I was going. But I'm sitting there and I picked this book up and I'm reading through it. It's my 89-year-old grandma's house, and I'm just thinking, turn to my dad and say, why has grandma got a book on multi-level marketing? She's like 89, you know what I mean? What does she care about this? And he's like, oh, that's your cousin. That's your second cousin, Steve. And I said, I've never heard of him before. He's like, oh, he's like, you should talk to him. He does those pyramid deals too, you know? And I start reading through his book, and like, my second cousin here, his book is about how he failed through like 11 network marketing companies over like 10 years time. It's like sad, the first part, right? And I mean, he'll be the first to tell you that he was like doing it completely wrong, but then he like found a good one, and he got with some people that actually had some success. And then, he's actually one of the top 10 highest paid like multi-level marketing people in the country, right? On a bad month for Jordan, right? His name's Jordan. He makes somewhere in the ballpark of about $300,000, right? This is whether he shows up to work or not. Whether he picks up the phone to do one phone call or not. He's not required to do that by anything, because that's like his distribution like center that like he's built and created. So Jordan and I have become very close like over the last couple of years. We have a really neat relationship because I'm the only one in like our immediate or extended family that's actually chosen this as a career path. And I'd done this before I even knew he existed, And so the funny thing is that, and this is what wrapped it up and solidified this direction, at least in my own life, is that I told you my folks, like my father's a doctor, my mom's a registered dietitian. They traditional business people. I have like, other doctors and lawyers and stuff like that, like in my immediate extended family. And they wrote this dude off a long time ago. They used to make fun of him. They're just like, oh, he does those pyramid deals, no, whatever. Well, Jordan is 10 times more wealthier than any of them right off the bat. I think he graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in landscape architecture. Which is an ongoing joke for us. But one thing that Jordan has, getting back to like the time and the money, is the fact that he's like, yeah, he's wealthier than like everybody in my family, right? He would never seem that way if you met him, though. But one thing that he's got going for him, which I think is the most, that drew me to this like idea or this like lifestyle of like the time versus money, right? Redefining what my definition of success was, is that he's the happiest, He doesn't have a boss to deal with. He doesn't have a million different employees that are working for him or anything like that. He just chills. I think he's in Budapest somewhere right now. And I'm going to try to possibly go see him. Like I'll leave. I'm going on a big trip next week. I'm going to go to Bali for a couple weeks, and then all through Southeast Asia and everything like that. And the coolest thing is going to happen is that every Friday I'm going to get paid. Right? I may not talk to my people for like a whole entire week, right? But that money is still going to come. And this is something this is miraculous to me. I've never experienced anything like this with any other kind of business, but it's going to work here. And so in a lot of ways, I've completely removed myself from the equation. And so that made a whole lot of sense to me. And so the idea isn't to wrap it up, and why I tell you that story is that whenever I get up and I talk about this, if it sounds somewhat persuasive, like, oh, you should all come do this too, that's because it's worked for me, so obviously I'm passionate about it, right? industry isn't for everybody. And like if you're here in college right now and you're looking at a bunch of different industries, this is a great place to do, because if you utilize like this time right now correctly, you'll be off to a really good start. You know? And the best thing that I learned here was really figuring out what it was that made me happy. And that wasn't necessarily going to be some kind of job or some kind of an amount of money, you know, that I was going to make. That was really a lot of unquantified things that I didn't come to understand until, you know, it took me a good like 25, 26 years of like living on this planet, interacting with other people before I figured out what that was, you know? And so I wouldn't say take my word from it. My favorite things to read are like autobiographies of successful people, and there is no linear straight line to success. And there's always going to be ups and downs, whatever it is that you decide to do. But if you don't quit and you keep going and you really figure out what it is that you can do that's going to make you happy as an individual, I found that the rest kind of fills itself in. You know, the rest just kind of makes sense along the way. So this is what's worked really well for me, and who knows, my industry might cease to exist in another 5 years, in which case I've got a pretty unique skill set where I really believe I'll land back on my feet too. And if you surround yourself with the right type of people who tend to just be successful and always seem to be resilient and land on their feet, then you're going to be in a better place, right, to always get back up again. So with that being said, I really appreciate the opportunity to come down here and talk to you all about this. This is always so much fun, and at least feel like I'm giving back a little bit to what I got to learn here. So again, thank you so much for having me.